Hello, beautiful soul family. Rebecca here, your Vibe mentor. Welcome back to another Monday Mastery, where we take a pulse on the current energies, revisit a little bit of last week, and then call in some guidance on how to move forward. As always, this is a timeless message. I will spend just a little bit of time touching on current astrology or solar weather, and then we will dive right into that timeless message. So, regardless of these first couple of minutes, whenever you find this, it is meant to find you. Trust that the divine order is in play at all times, and it is finding you in perfect divine timing. How was your Christmas? How was your week? It's interesting how consistently we experience things. This is one of the beautiful gifts of being a mentor and a coach and a trauma healer is when you meet with a lot of people, you get to see that we are not alone in this, that we are all in this together. And very commonly, we walk around with smiles on our faces and everything looks hunky-dory for everybody else. And yet we might be struggling inside, not realizing they are as well. So remember that we are all in this together. And it is difficult sometimes to let people see you. Vulnerability can be challenging. And we have this false belief that things should always be good. And that when things are good, it's somehow an indication of how well you are doing. Or if you're struggling, that it somehow is an indication that you are not doing well, or you've made a mistake or you're failing in some way. And I really want to just clarify. This is interesting because it's coming through right now. I had no intention of speaking to this. Is certainly right out of the gate. But let's remove that expectation going forward, not just for this video, but also for the rest of our lives. And we're going to talk a lot about why we experience challenges and what the darkness means, and remembering that as we shift our perspective, our expectations, we shift our internal environment, we then shift our external environment. And I do believe that is what we're all trying to do. And one of the many reasons why we expect ourselves to always be succeeding or doing well, or we desire to always feel good, because we don't value the balancing of the opposite. And so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Let's just kind of touch on the energy of this past week. It's interesting because over the last few weeks, if I have to guess, we're probably anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, we've had a bit of a lull from a solar weather perspective. And I say this every week. It is surprising because they have said that we are in solar maximum, which of course they never really know for sure until we're 6 months out from that peak. And yet the energies have been very intense, very intense. And we like to call them unmeasurables. Pat Donsworth on Facebook coined that term. And I always like to give credit where credit is due. So the unmeasurables have been high, to say the least. And I'm sure if any of you experienced intensity, especially around Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday last week, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, you are certainly not alone. You are certainly not alone. And the reason we talk about solar weather is because many times that correlates. Usually there's some sort of astrological or solar weather perspective or event that we can point to that helps us understand and explain the intensity, but there's not always a correlation there. And yes, the Schumann resonance is also a factor. And yes, there has been some activity or higher activity recently. And we could go into the science of how that's correlated to local weather. And depending if you're looking at the Italian measurements versus the Russian measurements, you're going to get different responses or feedback. All of that we just can kind of put on the shelf and say that everything is always in perfect divine order. We are living the experience of the perfection of the creator's plan, and whether or not that correlates to the Schumann resonance or a solar weather spike or a full moon or new moon or a retrograde, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, we're still experiencing it. And at the end of the day, our job is to learn how to work with what it is that we are experiencing. And that's what we're going to get into today. So I have lots of tips for you. So if you look back from a solar weather perspective, we did have a minor spike on Tuesday, Christmas Eve, which would explain some of the intensity that came through there. But that was just going from the 1, 2, 3 M-class solar flares to a 7, which relatively speaking is not all that high. Although I will say yesterday was extremely high. We had not only 23 plus M-class solar flares. I lost count at that. At some points, there might be one or two more, but we also had two X-class solar flares, minor. I think they were 1.1 and 1.5. So, but two X-class solar flares in less than 24 hours is quite a bit. So we do have, again, the correlation of the solar weather to the new moon, which is peaking. The new moon in Capricorn at 9 degrees peaks today at 5:27 Eastern time. And it's a beautiful gift. Depending on who you are and what your chart looks like, you will experience it differently. Luckily, this one has not been as intense. And when we look back over the last few weeks, the challenges that I want to talk to today really started right around that last Sagittarius new moon, which is interesting because it was as intense or more intense than your typical full moon. And so now we have come to the completion of that new moon cycle. There's many different cycles. So if you're an expert in astrology, don't come at me for saying this wrong, but we have completed 4 weeks since the last new moon, which in my intuitive sense, my energetic feeling right now is that we are wrapping this up. And again, that was not something I was going to say. So that's just coming through. I don't want to say we're completing it necessarily, but there was a cycle within a cycle that we have completed over the last 4 weeks, which I'm very happy to hear and receive and deliver to you because I was not aware of that until it just came through. Something I've wanted to speak on today that I have not addressed over the last couple of weeks, and I will partially say maybe I should apologize for not speaking to it. There was a part of me that was feeling the self-deprecation of, well, if I'm struggling, I'm not doing something right, and not wanting to speak to how difficult it has been the last few weeks. And the gift of the message that is coming through today is that we're no longer going to demean or punish ourselves when we experience difficulty. In fact, we're going to do the opposite. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. There has been a sense, and this is what I've really hesitated to speak to. There has been a sense that there was some sort of shift, whether you want to call it a timeline shift or, the switching of the train tracks, which we've talked about over the course of this past year. We are always moving between different variations of our destiny or our timeline or our life experience, dependent on our free will choices, our perspective, the thoughts we choose, the level of negativity that we're working with. And I'm going to touch on all of this in just a minute. But it did really feel like there was a surge of the lower energies. And what I was very hesitant to call out or call attention to is this feeling that it is sort of this last gasp of the darkness trying to pull us back down. And there's a lot of debate around, good versus evil, and there being only one power, one source, right? The law of one, we are all one, we are all from source, right? This question of the devil versus Satan versus demons. And it is something that I have been feeling my way through and asking for guidance on and clarity on. And I think that there is, as with everything, the duality of how we speak to this has made it difficult to come forward and present how I have experienced this. And I'm not going to dance around that anymore. I want to mention today, and to each his own, we all have different experiences. If you're part of my soul family, this will resonate with you. And if it doesn't, don't shoot the messenger. It's just not for you. It's not a big deal. I do partially believe that we are responsible for our own demons, that we can create a seeming bigger power than us through our own belief, our own stories, our unhealed trauma. We can grow darkness just as much as we can grow light. Of course, it's always unintentional. I also have come to understand that while that can be true, it can also be true that there is a power made by source, ultimately at the end of the day with a divine purpose that seems to carry the darkness, that seems to call forward the darkness, that seems to challenge us. And again, that's what I want to get into today. Why do we struggle? Why do we feel attacked? Why do we feel suppressed? Anytime we externalize the blame, we give our power away. So we do want to take ownership and say that whether or not this is the darkness that I have grown from within me, or we collectively as humanity have grown, it can also be that this external, right? And I'm careful when I say that, because anytime we start blaming something outside of us, we are weakened. We're giving our power away. But it can also be true, whether you call it Satan or the devil or demons, it doesn't really matter, that this other force, this energy is calling forward, calling to our attention, amplifying, triggering, testing us. And it can be both. It can be this external force that calls forward the darkness that is within us, right? Like attracts like, so like magnetism, right? Like magnetism, that external force can help to amplify what is within us to help us. And I know that I don't like that. I don't like that. And I'm sure many of you say that. I don't like that either. I don't want to believe that. But unfortunately, that seems to be the way that this world works, is that pain and struggle is necessary. Now, I will say this: suffering is not necessary. Pain can be very, very temporary, and we can move through challenge very, very quickly. It doesn't have to take us out for days and weeks and months and years if we learn how to work with this. And this is what I want to get into today, is that we, as the soul of humanity, right, as aspects of the divine, are each individual path and soul came here to learn certain things that help us go back to oneness, get back to oneness, get back to unification with each other and with the creator, right? And so if we are in resistance to the pain and the challenges that we experience, we will suffer. Pain plus resistance equals suffering. And so if we don't want to suffer, we have to move the resistance to the challenge, right? And like I said, pain can be temporary, right? If I cut myself, I'm not going to feel long-term sustained pain, depending on the level of the wound, but usually it's an initial point of pain to let us know you've been cut, and then you move into the healing process. And while the cut may remain, you don't necessarily have to continue to suffer if you take care of it, if you handle it properly. So if we can start to move from the rejection of the shadow, right? If we look at, we sort of demonize one energy and praise another, right? That the darkness is bad and the light is good. Feeling happy and joyful is good, and feeling sad or feeling pain or feeling the wound is bad. That the sometimes we even do that with masculine and feminine energy, where we demonize one versus the other, and all are necessary, all are good. I'm going to pause here because we've got the garbage man driving by. Hopefully you don't hear that. So let's learn to recognize when we are demonizing one energy over the other. Let's learn to recognize that it is negativity. It is problematic, if you will, if we demonize one energy over the other. In fact, it is the negativity and the rejection or the resistance against those parts that we deem problematic that slow us down and delay our progress. It causes more suffering and pain. It holds us in place instead of allowing us to evolve and move towards whether you want to call it ascension or oneness or wholeness or being Christ-like or being one with the creator. They're all similar and moving to all paths lead home, right? So let's learn to, in this moment, I recognize it's going to be difficult. It's not something that we easily come to. That for most of my life, I have lived in resistance against the pain, the suffering, the shadow, the darkness, those moments of struggle. And 45 years later, I'm finally coming to a place where I'm ready to embrace it. And I want, if it's struggling, if no, I want to offer you a seed. If it is difficult for you, let it just be a seed. Let it just be something you consider. Maybe I might want to consider that the shadow, the darkness, the difficulty could be good. I might be able to embrace it. I might be able to consider that I even love it. If it is the difficulty and the shadow and the pain and the suffering that move me towards oneness, can I see this as a positive? It comes to mind the Japanese theory or belief, forgive me if I'm using the wrong term, where if a pot breaks, they believe that the pot becomes more valuable because they use gold to readhere the parts. And so now where the cracks were become the most beautiful part of the vessel. It also comes to mind that they say that the light enters through the cracks. That if we are so whole and complete and okay in ourselves that we don't need the divine, we are not driven towards oneness and unification, we are not broken down to the point where our ego dies, where we are not so crushed that we need God to save us, then we will remain stuck. We're not progressing. We're not moving towards that oneness and wholeness that we ultimately, at the end of the day, really desire. We think it's money, or we think it's safety, or we think it's security, or we think it's a relationship, or we think it's health, or we think it's all these external things. But this is the process of being broken down, is as these things are taken from you, you realize it's not what I wanted. It's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was peace. What I wanted was joy. What I wanted was freedom. What I wanted was expansion. And all of that comes through the breaking down. So let's remember that nothing outside of us is going to actually give us what I want. Nothing outside of us is actually going to resolve the problems and the challenges that we think we have. That it must come from within. And the only way for us to come to the understanding that is necessary to see that nothing outside of us actually is necessary, that it is all within, is that breaking down process, is that challenge. Now, here's the good news. Now that I've thoroughly convinced you that we have to want and desire and love and embrace darkness, you don't have to have as much as we have been experiencing. We don't have to suffer as much as we have been. We don't have to learn through difficulty quite to the extent that we have been. But we have to learn how to reduce that, and that requires embracing it, right? So if we have negativity, we have doubt, we have resistance towards the difficulty, we actually prolong it. We require more of it to learn. It is when we embrace it and we love it and we celebrate it that it actually moves through really quickly. For those of you who followed me for a long time, you're part of the community, you're one of our coaching clients, you know that we feel it to heal it, that on average, an emotion lasts about 90 seconds. Now, if you've had your whole life that you've avoided these things, it's going to be, 90 seconds on top of 90 seconds. But as we move through these things, they move through really quickly, and they are messengers. And we don't have to live in it. While we think that being in resistance to the difficulty, while we think being reactive in our coping mechanism, while we think that if I avoid and distract and ignore and pretend and numb and use my coping mechanisms to not have to face the challenge or the discomfort, we think we're getting rid of it, but we are actually delaying it. So the way we move away from so much struggle and pain is embracing it, is celebrating it, right? So the more negativity, the more doubt, the more resistance, the slower we move through the hardship, the more we delay our miracle. Pain and suffering are not required, but we amplify and grow and cause ourselves to receive more of it in the rejection of it. Right? So the light enters through the cracks, means that we allow ourselves to crack. We are not pushing away the discomfort. We are not avoiding and distracting. We go through the valley so that we can come out on the mountaintop. We let ourselves crack so that the light can come in. Okay. So how do we do that? Right? When something difficult comes up, instead of going, oh, I don't like that. I don't want this. I want this to change. I want to fix it. I want alcohol. I want drugs. I want sex. I want social media. I want friends. I want vacations. I want to spend money. No, we stop, we pause, and we celebrate it. Wow. What a blessing. What a gift. What a pleasure. I love it. I love it. I love the pain. I love the experience. It is a gift. It is a messenger. I am here to learn this exact lesson. Show me how. I love using sort of the Ho'oponopono process as it relates to difficulty. Sometimes we can blame a person. Sometimes we can blame an experience. Sometimes we can blame ourselves, right? This is where we start to say, I love you. I'm so happy this is happening. I'm sorry for the role that I have played in this because it is coming to me because this is the lesson I must learn, right? Please forgive me for the role I have played. Thank you for the role you are playing. I bless you, right? Bless the person, bless the experience. What a blessing it is that I am experiencing this. I love it. I love it, right? What a pleasure. And then, because that's not always easy, we ask for help. We ask the divine for clarity. What lesson, what karma, what trauma am I being asked to face and move through? What is the gift? Show me how. Give me wisdom. Give me strength. Instead of praying for this thing to change or this person to change or this experience to change, we want to recognize the as within, so without means this is in me. Change me. Bless the experience. Bless the person. I am blessed for this experience. And then ask, how do I become more like you? How do I become more Christ-like? How do I become more like the light? How do I become more like the divine? Change me. Show me how I need to change. How do I shift this? And let's also remember that our experience is not real. It can seem like our greatest fear is happening right in front of our very eyes, and yet it is a hologram. It is just an emanation coming out of you. Ask, why am I experiencing this? Why is this character in my movie? And know that it is not real. As you shift yourself, you shift your reality, right? But the questions have to be addressed. Can you let go of your story? Can you let go of victimhood? Can you believe the divine wants good for you? Can you believe that there are multiple paths and you don't have to live the one of suffering and struggle? Can you let go of all of those old limiting beliefs, all the negativity, all the doubt that slows you down and keeps you stuck, right? Remembering our highest priority should be our internal state of being, the way we respond to negative experiences, the way we believe that someone else is to blame. They're out to get me. It's their fault. I'm helpless because. Can you let it go? Because that will be your first step of stepping out of long-term suffering and into short-term pain and gain. Right? You have to believe that God wants something good for you. That this is just the rules of the video game, right? Like attracts like. Can you let go of the negative thinking? Can you let go of the resistance? Can you let go of the trauma? Can you reach out for help if you struggle to let go of those things? Can you let go of the belief that I can't or I have to, whatever you want to fill in that remainder with? It is a choice. It is a choice. I want to give credit to David Guillaume. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. He teaches a Kabbalah, and there is a lot of wisdom there that is informing this message today. And I want to offer his exact phrase that he likes to recommend when we experience hardship or we experience difficulty, depression, anxiety, disappointment, fear, shame, guilt, any of those lower energies, the gifts that help us see where our work needs to be done. His recommendation is pause. What a pleasure, right? Celebrate it. Love it. Find your words, find what feels good to you. And of course, my note just fell. So as I mentioned in the beginning, it feels as though we have completed some sort of cycle. Things are starting to get a little bit lighter. The light is coming back in. Happy solstice as well, by the way. It's a little bit ago, but still, the light is returning, and that's what's important. The days are getting longer for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, but regardless, the light is starting to come back in. And David also teaches that as we respond, pause, what a pleasure, to difficulty, we are pulling the light in. We are becoming a vessel that can hold more light. Our vessel cannot hold light if we are filled with negativity and doubt and fear and guilt and shame and all those lower energies. That when we empty ourselves out and we embrace the challenge and celebrate it, we then release some of that negativity. We empty our vessel and make space for the light to come in. This is a beautiful new year. I know that people like to say, oh, it's arbitrary, but truth be told, we collectively as humanity are creating all the time based on our expectations. So if you want to deny or ignore the fact that billions of people around the world are celebrating a new year, to each his own. I get it. I'm an Aries baby. I very much feel like spring is the beginning of the new year. We can have many new years, right? We have a different new year in China. It's great. Doesn't matter. Right now, new energies are coming in. Light is coming in. Choose to name it however you will, but believe the light is coming back. The light is coming in. Things are getting easier. I have noticed, I think I've mentioned recently, that when we go through a retrograde, we have a bit of a difficult time when that planet first goes back, but then as it stations and it starts to go forward, we kind of get a sense of, oh, okay, I know what we're being called to learn here. I mentioned last week, we've got a lot of retrogrades, two Mercury retrogrades that are basically bookended, sort of, by Mars and Venus retrogrades, all happening between now and I want to say April, May. We are out of the shadow of all of that. So this is the time to recognize the internal work, right? What do you think when you experience a negative situation? How do you feel? Who are you blaming? Are you a victim? That's all the internal work. All the rewords apply, right? And because Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all personal planets, again, it just points even more so to internal work. It's all in you. You inverse. You are the emanation of your universe, and you can shift it. I promise you, I pinky promise you this, because I've tried it and I know, and it works. If you could just take David's recommendation, pause, what a pleasure. I prefer personally pause, what a blessing. I really like, because I'm blessing the situation, I'm blessing the person, I bless myself, right? But find your word to say, I love it. And I can guarantee you, you will start to see a shift within a couple days, if not immediately. Your world will change as you change yourself internally, right? Big shifts are here. This is the key. All of these retrogrades are very, very important, because it is the preparation phase for what you have asked for. If your vessel cannot hold what you have called in, you will have to go through the preparation of becoming someone who can hold the gifts that you have asked for. So if you've asked for big things, don't be surprised if you experience big challenges. But love it. Bless it. What a pleasure. And that feels complete. I love you, my friends, so very much. Please do reach out if you need help. You are not alone. You are not failing. You are not doing it wrong. Let's just find new meaning. so you can step into your beautiful big dream life that the divine is trying to give to you. I'll see you in the next one. Namaste.